This video is going to be part one of the process to build portfolios that follow the capital allocations line. This first part, we're going to focus on the stock fund and bond fund returns, variance, standard deviation, covariance, and correlation. In other videos, we will continue filling the rest of the spreadsheet. So I'm going to zoom in so we can focus on that part. And these are the formulas that we're going to be using during this part of the video, this part of the process. So the scenario starts with some information that is given to you. We have a probability of 0.05 for a severe recession coming up. Another outcome could be a mild recession at 0.25. We can have a normal situation, normal growth at 0.40, or a boom in the economy with a 0.3 probability. If we have a severe recession, the stock fund is expected to have a 37% loss, negative 37%. And the bond fund would be expected to have a loss of 9%. And for each recession, growth, etc., we have a different potential outcome. So we will start with getting the expected return of the stock fund. So in Excel, as usual, we'll start the formula with an equal sign. And this one here, this says mean. This is the formula we're following, which is the return or the expected return of each scenario times the probability of that scenario. And at the end, we're going to add them together. So stock fund, we take the negative 30%. It has a probability of 0.05 happening, plus the negative 11% that has that probability, the 14% that has this probability. And what we're doing is we're adding those multiplications. Okay, let's check the formula. F5 times D5 plus F6 times D6 plus, and so on and so forth. Looks good. So the stock fund has an expected return of 10% on average based on the potential probabilities of the different scenarios. And what we do is we repeat the process before the bond fund. And the bond fund has an expected return of 5%. Now, we're going to do variance. Now, variance is a little different. We're going to follow this formula now, which is each return minus the average, which is the one we just calculated. We're going to square that, and then we multiply it by each probability, and then we sum them all together. So this is what this looks like. We're going to start with the piece of x minus mu. Mu means the Greek symbol for average or the mean. So I take the equal sign. I'm going to open that parenthesis. I'm doing the stock fund. So I'm going to take the stock fund minus the average that we just calculated, which is that 10%. And we're going to square it. And then we're going to multiply it by the probability. And since it's a sum, we're just going to start doing the same process again down the list, adding them together. So again, don't forget to square it. I have to put these parentheses because if not, the order of operations, you notice PEMDAS, will not work properly. Here we go. So we have all these are properly multiplied and added together. Let's double check. We are missing one square here. Okay, so your variance for the stock fund is 3.47%. That's the expected variance. And then we do the same thing for the bond fund. So I'm going to do something a little different to share with you tricks of the trade, like they say. Now, that's not the answer. What we do is we go to fix and adjust, because we want the same numbers, but with the bond fund, not the stock fund. We want those probabilities. So I'm just going to go ahead and move those over here. And the other one's already shifted to the right place. And that gives you a 0.68% of variance for the bond fund. That was this. Now the standard deviation, as you know, is a square root of the variance. It looks a little longer here because inside the square root, it has the same formula you already see here, but we already did this part when we did variance. So the inside here is already done. So all we need is to add the square root. So we use Excel square root function. Here we can just copy and paste it. And those are standard deviations for those two funds. And now we're going to move on to covariance. So for covariance, we're going to follow this formula. It's going to be a little similar to the variance formula, but instead of squaring, we're going to multiply between the differences of stock fund and bond fund, or the deviations. And then we're going to use the probability, multiply by that as well. So, and then we're going to add them together at the end. So we start with the equal sign, and here's asking you for x minus the expected x. Now, a lot of these formulas are using different letters for the same thing. Actually bringing these formulas with the different letters on purpose and get familiar with the similarities, or I'll just say with the different symbols that mean the same thing. For example, mu is used as a symbol for average, but so is x bar. Now, technically speaking, mu is population average, it's a sample average, but in this case, it can be used exchangeably. Here, E of X, which is similar to what I have here, also means X bar or mu or X bar in this situation. So let's go with covariance here. So we are going to take X. Well, we want to open that parenthesis first, and then take the expected return of X on severe recession minus that average. But we're not going to square it this time. What we're going to do is going to multiply by the bond expected minus the bond's average, and then we're going to multiply by the probability. And then we're going to repeat that process down the list. So I'm going to take the stock fund minus the stock average, multiply by the bond fund expected return on that specific scenario, minus the average, times the probability of that scenario. Plus, again, stock fund of the scenario, stock fund returns average expected, multiplied by the probability, and the last one, to do something a little different here because we can't see it. So I'm just going to write it in, which is H8 minus the M4. And then we're going to multiply by the probability. And that is the covariance of these two funds. And that completed this formula. Last but not least, for this video, we're going to calculate correlation. We're going to follow this formula here. So correlation, we're going to take the covariance and we're going to divide it by, it's important to put the parentheses here as well, the standard deviation of the stock fund times the standard deviation of the bond fund. And that's what that formula is doing. And that's all we do. And that is our correlation. That's it for this video. We will continue working on the spreadsheet on the next video.